and her mother. She's got the no-nonsense of her father, and she's got much more. She's got the discretion of her mother, and she will not have said this without thinking about it very carefully.
Princess Anne has just delivered the most explosive ultimatum in royal history, and King Charles is in complete meltdown. The Princess Royal has shattered decades of royal protocol, demanding her brother to choose between his crown and his wife in a confrontation so brutal it left the king shocked. Palace insiders are calling it the Doomsday Option, a devastating ultimatum that could tear apart everything the monarchy represents. But why has Anne chosen to detonate this royal nuclear bomb now? Insiders suggest the timing isn't accidental, it's calculated destruction. Every moment since Camilla became queen consort has been a battle for the monarchy's survival, and Charles never saw the enemy living in his own bed. The breaking point that changed everything. The explosion came without warning, tearing through the royal household like a constitutional earthquake. It started with a single leaked document that would ignite the biggest royal crisis since Edward VIII's abdication. Hidden within the Duchy of Cornwall's confidential archives, palace investigators discovered something that would make every royal nightmare seem trivial by comparison. The document revealed Camilla's systematic infiltration of royal finances, placing her children as future trustees of the crown's most sacred assets. But this was just the beginning of a betrayal so calculated, so ruthlessly executed, that even seasoned royal observers were left speechless. Princess Anne was the first to see the smoking gun evidence. According to explosive palace sources, she burst into an emergency meeting with Prince William, slamming the documents onto the table with volcanic fury. Her words still echo through Windsor Castle. "This ends now, or we lose everything our mother died protecting." The evidence was irrefutable and devastating. Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles hadn't just been given access to royal events, they had been systematically positioned as inheritors of crown properties worth billions. Camilla had orchestrated the most audacious royal takeover in British history, and she had almost succeeded. Palace staff described the aftermath as an institutional meltdown. Senior advisors were seen rushing through corridors, emergency meetings were called at midnight, and for the first time in his reign, King Charles was observed breaking down completely, sobbing uncontrollably in his private study. The woman he had fought decades to marry had betrayed not just him, but the entire monarchy. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come, because what Princess Anne discovered next would push her to issue the ultimatum that would shatter Charles's world forever. Anne's devastating discovery. The Princess Royal had suspected something was wrong for months, but nothing could have prepared her for the truth she was about to uncover. Working with Prince William's private investigators, Anne obtained access to Camilla's private correspondence dating back years. What they found was a masterpiece of manipulation so sophisticated it would have impressed Machiavelli himself. Email after email revealed Camilla's methodical campaign to integrate her family into the royal bloodline through proximity, influence, and calculated positioning. The smoking gun came in a private message from Camilla to Laura Lopes. "Patience, darling. By the time they realize what's happened, it will be too late to undo. We're not just joining the family, we're becoming it." Anne's reaction was immediate and explosive. Palace sources describe her as incandescent with rage, pacing her office for hours while processing the full scope of Camilla's deception. This wasn't family loyalty. It was dynasty hijacking of the most ruthless order. But what pushed Anne over the edge wasn't the ambition itself. It was discovering that Camilla had been actively undermining Charles's relationship with his sons, feeding him carefully crafted stories about William and Harry's unreasonable expectations, while positioning her own children as the reasonable alternatives. The Princess Royal realized with crystal clarity that Camilla hadn't married Charles for love, she had married him for conquest, and she was winning. Anne's emergency call to William changed everything. According to insider sources, her words were chilling. "She's destroying him from the inside out. If we don't act now, there won't be a monarchy left to save." That conversation would trigger the most dramatic royal confrontation in modern history. The ultimatum that shattered a king. The meeting that would define Charles's reign took place on a rain-soaked Tuesday evening in the king's private study at Clarence House. Princess Anne arrived unannounced, carrying a folder that contained enough evidence to destroy Camilla's reputation forever. But she hadn't come to negotiate or discuss strategy. She had come to deliver an ultimatum that would test every bond of family loyalty Charles possessed. Palace sources describe the scene as apocalyptic. Anne, normally composed and diplomatic, was transformed into an avenging angel protecting her family's legacy. Her words cut through Charles like surgical strikes. "You have 48 hours to announce your divorce from Camilla, or I will release everything to the press myself." Charles, according to witnesses, went pale as death. The folder Anne carried contained not just evidence of Camilla's financial manipulations, but recordings of private conversations where the queen consort mocked the royal family, dismissed Charles's legitimate children as obstacles, and outlined her long-term strategy for installing her own bloodline at the heart of the monarchy. The most devastating recording captured Camilla telling a confidant, "Charles is so desperate to be loved that he can't see I'm using him. By the time he realizes my children will be so embedded in the system that removing them would cause a constitutional crisis." Anne's voice was ice-cold as she played each recording. "She has turned our brother into a puppet, manipulated our family's finances, and positioned herself to destroy everything our mother built. This ends now." But Charles's response would shock even his steel-willed sister. Charles crumbles under impossible pressure. The king, who had waited 70 years to wear the crown, was reduced to a broken man in minutes. Eyewitness accounts describe Charles collapsing into his chair, tears streaming down his face as the full scope of his wife's betrayal became undeniable. The recordings Anne played weren't just evidence of financial manipulation. They revealed a woman who had coldly calculated every moment of their relationship, viewing Charles not as a husband, but as a means to ultimate power. "How long have you known?" Charles whispered, his voice barely audible above the rain battering the windows. Anne's response was surgical. "I've suspected for 2 years. I've had proof for 6 months. I've been waiting for you to see it yourself, but your blindness is going to destroy us all." The confrontation intensified when Anne revealed the most damaging evidence of all: financial records showing Camilla had been secretly funneling royal funds to her children's private accounts, using her position to enrich her family while publicly claiming she wanted nothing for them. Charles broke down completely. Palace staff describe hearing animal-like sobbing echoing through the corridors as the king realized the woman he had sacrificed everything to marry had been systematically robbing his family's legacy. But Anne wasn't finished. Her final blow would push Charles to the brink of abdication. "She recorded your private conversations with William and Harry," Anne revealed with devastating calm. "She has hours of audio of you discussing family matters, state secrets, and personal weaknesses. She's been building a dossier to use against all of us." The revelation that Camilla had been spying on the king himself was the final straw. Charles, according to sources, screamed in anguish before collapsing completely, his body racked with sobs of betrayal and humiliation. The queen consort's desperate counterattack. Camilla's response to Anne's ultimatum was swift, ruthless, and terrifying in its calculated precision. Within hours of Anne's confrontation with Charles, the queen consort had mobilized her own network of palace insiders, media contacts, and political allies. Her strategy was as brilliant as it was vicious. If she was going down, she would take the entire royal family with her. Palace sources reveal that Camilla immediately contacted several major newspapers, threatening to release devastating revelations about the royal family's private behavior if any action was taken against her. Her arsenal of recorded conversations wasn't just blackmail material, it was a nuclear weapon aimed at the heart of the monarchy. Her most chilling message came in a private call to Charles. "If you think you can discard me like you did Diana, think again. I know where every body is buried in this family. Try to divorce me, and I'll make sure your reign ends in the greatest scandal in royal history. But Camilla had underestimated Princess Anne's resolve and overestimated her own position. The Princess Royal had anticipated this counterattack and prepared her own devastating response. Anne's team had been quietly building their own evidence file, documenting not just Camilla's financial crimes but her connections to several unsavory characters from her past. Tax evasion, benefit fraud, and influence peddling were just the beginning of charges that could be brought against the Queen Consort if necessary. The palace was now a war zone, with husband and wife facing off across battle lines that would determine the monarchy's survival. William's nuclear intervention. Prince William's entrance into the crisis would tip the balance irreversibly. The Prince of Wales had been monitoring the situation from Kensington Palace, coordinating with his Aunt Anne while preparing for the possibility of emergency succession. But when Camilla's threats escalated to include attacking his children's legitimacy and Catherine's background, William's restraint evaporated completely. Palace insiders describe William's arrival at Clarence House as the arrival of Judgment Day. The future king had brought his own folder, one containing evidence that Camilla's children had been using royal connections for personal business deals, violating every principle of royal neutrality. His confrontation with his father was brutal and decisive. She goes, or I go. Choose now. The ultimatum that would have been unthinkable in any other royal generation was delivered with cold precision. William had calculated that Charles would never risk losing his heir, and he was right. The king's remaining resistance crumbled in the face of his son's absolute determination. But William's most devastating weapon was his threat to reveal Camilla's treatment of his mother's memory. According to explosive sources, he had obtained recordings of Camilla mocking Diana's mental health struggles and dismissing her charitable work as attention-seeking theater. "The public would crucify you both if they heard how she really talks about my mother," William told his father with icy calm. "Is protecting her worth destroying everything Diana stood for?" The psychological warfare was working. Charles was being systematically isolated from every source of support, with his own family united against the woman he had fought decades to defend. The final betrayal that sealed Camilla's fate. Just when it seemed the crisis couldn't intensify further, the most shocking revelation of all emerged from within Camilla's own circle. One of her closest confidants, terrified by the escalating royal war, leaked the most damaging evidence yet. Camilla had been secretly negotiating with American television networks about a potential tell-all interview if her position became untenable. The proposed program would have been a nuclear attack on the entire royal family, revealing intimate secrets that could have destroyed the monarchy permanently. The leaked correspondence showed Camilla's true contempt for her royal role. "These people think they're untouchable because of their bloodline. Wait until America hears what really goes on behind palace walls. I'll make Meghan's interview look like a love letter." When Princess Anne presented this evidence to Charles, the last vestiges of his loyalty to Camilla disintegrated. The woman he had sacrificed his reputation to marry was prepared to burn down the institution he had spent his life serving. Charles's breakdown was complete. According to palace sources, he spent 3 days in complete seclusion, refusing food and speaking to no one except his closest advisors. The weight of betrayal, combined with the impossible choice between his wife and his crown, had pushed the king to the edge of abdication. But Anne wasn't finished with her systematic destruction of Camilla's position. The final blow came when she revealed that Camilla had been secretly meeting with Republican politicians, discussing the possibility of supporting constitutional changes that would weaken the monarchy in exchange for personal protection from prosecution. The Queen Consort hadn't just betrayed her husband, she had betrayed her country. The decree that changed everything. The document that would end Camilla's reign was signed at 3:47 a.m. on a Wednesday morning, witnessed only by the king's private secretary and Princess Anne. Charles, hollow-eyed and trembling, put his signature to a decree that would remove all royal titles, privileges, and protections from his wife within 72 hours. The divorce proceedings would begin immediately, with grounds of fraud, betrayal of royal duty, and conduct incompatible with the dignity of the crown. But the decree went further than anyone had anticipated. Camilla's children were permanently banned from all royal properties, their access to royal funds terminated immediately, and their names removed from all succession documents. The systematic erasure was complete and irreversible. Palace sources describe Charles as a broken man signing his own death warrant. He knew the divorce would generate massive public scrutiny and potentially damage his reign permanently, but the alternative, allowing Camilla to destroy the monarchy from within, was unthinkable. The most devastating clause in the decree was the seizure of all recordings and documents in Camilla's possession. Royal investigators would have 48 hours to secure every piece of potential blackmail material, ensuring she could never threaten the family again. Princess Anne's final victory was psychological. She insisted that Charles deliver the divorce papers to Camilla personally, forcing him to confront the woman who had manipulated him for decades. Camilla's final humiliation. The scene when Charles delivered the divorce papers to his wife was witnessed by palace staff who described it as the end of a dynasty built on lies. Camilla, who had been preparing her own nuclear response, was caught completely off guard by the speed and thoroughness of her destruction. The woman, who had calculated every move for years, had finally been outmaneuvered by opponents who understood the royal game better than she ever could. Her reaction was immediate and volcanic. According to sources, she screamed accusations at Charles, threatened to expose royal secrets, and promised that her divorce would be the most damaging spectacle in royal history. But her threats now rang hollow. Every piece of evidence had been secured, every recording confiscated, every avenue of attack sealed off. Charles, strengthened by his sister's presence, delivered the final blow with devastating calm. "You used me, manipulated my family, and tried to steal my heritage. Now you'll face the consequences alone." Camilla's composure finally cracked completely. Witnesses describe her collapse as the destruction of a woman who had played God and lost everything. Her carefully constructed image of dignity and grace dissolved into tears, rage, and desperate pleas for mercy that would never come. The queen consort, who had schemed to become the power behind the throne, was reduced to packing her belongings under armed guard, her every move monitored to ensure no final betrayal could occur. The monarchy's rebirth from ashes. The aftermath of Camilla's removal transformed the royal family overnight. Public support for King Charles, which had been steadily declining amid growing suspicions about his wife's influence, surged to levels not seen since his coronation. The British people, finally witnessing decisive leadership from their monarch, rallied around a king who had chosen duty over personal happiness. Princess Anne's approval ratings reached historic heights as details of her investigation became public. The woman who had saved the monarchy from internal destruction was hailed as the true guardian of Queen Elizabeth's legacy. Her calculated campaign to expose Camilla's manipulation was praised as masterful statecraft by constitutional experts worldwide. Prince William emerged as the clear winner in the royal restructuring. With Camilla's influence eliminated, his relationship with his father began healing immediately. Palace sources describe emotional reconciliation meetings where Charles acknowledged how his wife had poisoned his relationships with his sons. The constitutional implications were staggering. Parliament passed emergency legislation to prevent future royal infiltration by non-blood family members, ensuring that no future consort could manipulate royal finances or succession planning. The Camilla crisis, as historians now call it, resulted in the most significant constitutional reforms in centuries. But the personal cost to Charles was devastating and permanent. The king's broken legacy. Charles III, who had waited longer than any heir in British history to wear the crown, would forever be remembered as the king who chose his throne over his heart. The divorce proceedings, conducted with unprecedented secrecy to protect state interests, revealed the full scope of Camilla's manipulation to a select group of judges and constitutional experts. Their sealed reports describe systematic fraud, emotional abuse, and calculated betrayal that shocked even experienced legal professionals. Charles's personal transformation was complete but tragic. Palace staff describe a man who had lost all capacity for trust. viewing every relationship through the lens of potential manipulation. The king, who had once been criticized for being too emotional, had become a cold, calculating monarch focused solely on institutional survival. His rare private comments about the crisis revealed the depth of his trauma. "I spent decades fighting to marry the woman I thought I loved, only to discover she was my greatest enemy. How do you recover from being so fundamentally wrong about another human being?" The answer, according to those closest to him, is that you don't recover, you simply survive. Princess Anne's victory in saving the monarchy came at the cost of destroying her brother's capacity for human connection. The king, who had once dreamed of modernizing the royal family, had instead become its most isolated member, protected by constitutional safeguards, but emotionally devastated by betrayal. The eternal consequences. The reverberations of Anne's ultimatum continue to shape the monarchy today. Camilla's exile from royal life was complete and permanent. Stripped of all titles, properties, and protections, she disappeared into obscurity, her dreams of queenly power reduced to bitter memories and legal restrictions that prevented her from ever telling her story publicly. Her children's brief taste of royal privilege ended abruptly. Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles found themselves permanently banned from royal events, their access to power eliminated overnight. The family that had almost succeeded in infiltrating the highest levels of British society was reduced to private citizens with no special status or influence. But the most profound change was in the royal family itself. Princess Anne's decisive action had saved the monarchy from internal destruction, but it had also revealed the institution's vulnerability to manipulation by those closest to power. Future kings and queens would rule under constitutional safeguards designed to prevent another Camilla crisis. The woman who had fought for decades to become queen consort had instead become the cautionary tale that would protect future monarchs from similar manipulation. Her legacy was not power or influence, but the constitutional reforms that ensured no one could ever again come so close to hijacking the British crown. Charles III would rule for the rest of his life with the knowledge that he had been saved from his own blindness by the sister who loved the monarchy more than she loved his happiness. It was a burden that would define his reign and shadow his legacy forever. The king who had crumbled under Anne's demand had ultimately been rebuilt into a stronger monarch, but the personal cost of that transformation would haunt him until his final day. Princess Anne had saved the crown, but she had sacrificed her brother's heart to do it. And in the brutal mathematics of royal survival, that trade was not just necessary. It was the only choice that could have preserved the monarchy for future generations. The woman who would never be queen had nearly destroyed everything. The princess who never sought power had saved it all. History would remember Princess Anne as the guardian who protected the crown when it mattered most. And Charles would forever carry the scars of choosing duty over the woman who had betrayed them both.